The wind pressed hard against the shutters that night, rattling the glass as if the past itself begged to be let in. Eleanor sat by her hearth, shawl drawn tight, hands too old for the mending needle she held. The flame in the stove flickered low, throwing shadows across her cabin, shadows that looked too much like memories she tried not to name. 40 winters had passed since she last heard his voice. 40 springs since he rode away, promising he'd return by harvest. His absence had become her companion, grief worn smooth like river stone. Outside, snow whispered across frozen ground. Wagon wheels creaked on distant road, or perhaps imagination played tricks on a lonely heart. A letter lay beside her, the last he ever sent, corners worn soft from decades of touch. She traced the ink. "Wait for me. I will come." She had waited. Through sickness, through grave soil laid over her husband, through the death of hope itself. The embers dimmed when suddenly 3 knocks struck the door. Slow, certain. Her needle fell, heart pounding like a young girl's. Eleanor rose, unsure whether she walked toward a ghost or a miracle. Either way, life was about to change. The door rattled under the force of the wind, or was it her trembling hands? Eleanor hesitated with her palm against the worn cedar planks, heart thundering like hooves through snow. She lifted the latch slowly. A gust blew in, flinging snow crystals across her boots. A man stood on the threshold, tall, shoulders stooped from years rather than weather, his coat heavy with frost. A wool scarf hid most of his face, but his eyes, gray, familiar, stared at her as though afraid she might vanish. Eleanor gripped the doorframe to steady herself. "Evening, ma'am," he said, voice low, roughened by long travel. The lantern behind her cast gold upon his features, cheekbones sharp, jaw lined with age, beard streaked silver. He removed his hat, a gesture too polite for strangers. "Forgive the hour." Her breath caught. That voice, deeper, cracked with time but known. "Thomas." His eyes closed, as if hearing his name aloud was too much. "Aye," he whispered, "if you'll have the truth of it." The room tilted. Eleanor caught herself on the door. He looked down, boots heavy with road dust, not sleigh snow. He had walked more than ridden. "I would have knocked sooner," he murmured, "but I did not know if I'd be welcomed." Eleanor stared, unable to blink. She had rehearsed this moment, alone in lamplight, imagining anger, tears, questions. Yet standing before him, she felt only the strange weightlessness of disbelief. 40 years, she whispered. Not a letter, not a word. Thomas swallowed. "I sent the words," he said. "Life just lost them before they reached you." He stepped back, as though preparing to turn away. "I won't trouble you if—" Eleanor's voice finally found itself. "Come in, Thomas." He paused, then nodded once, a soldier accepting mercy, and crossed her threshold. She shut the door. The wind fell silent. Thomas stood by the hearth, thawing stiff fingers. His coat steamed as the heat worked through the cold. Every inch of him was a memory remade. The same hands that once carved her initials into maple bark, now bent with age. She poured tea, simple wild mint, faint warmth, hands trembling more than the porcelain. Thomas glanced at her table, plain, neat, lined with mending, and a single letter worn from decades. "You kept it," he murmured. Eleanor followed his gaze. Samuel's last letter, promising his return. "I kept nothing else of you." He nodded, accepting deserved pain. "Do you want answers?" he asked. "I want truth," she replied. Thomas's shoulders lowered, as if he had waited 40 winters to be asked. "I rode south that summer," he began, "to join your father in Texas. Meant to prove myself worthy of you." Eleanor stiffened. "You proved it with your heart. I never asked more." Thomas's gaze darkened. "But your father did. He said I wasn't fit to keep you, so I left to earn the right." She stared stunned. "My father told me you'd forgotten me." Thomas shook his head. "I sent letters every month. I carved your name on my rifle. I prayed your forgiveness more nights than I slept." Eleanor's throat tightened. What changed? Thomas looked into the fire, flame reflecting in his eyes. "I was ambushed," he murmured. "Army escort turned massacre. I lived, but the bullet stole my voice for a year, left me unable to speak or write steady. He touched his scar, above collarbone, pale and puckered. And when I rode back to you, Eleanor's body braced. I saw you in your wedding shawl. Her fingers dug into her skirt. I waited, she whispered. 7 years, Thomas. 7. His jaw trembled. And I came back 8 years too late. Silence folded over them, thick as wool. Eleanor sat slowly. You had chances, she said. Years after. Was there no word you could send? Thomas leaned forward, hands clasped. There is a boy, he whispered. Your husband's son. I cannot curse him by coming. You deserved peace, Eleanor, not war between two men. Her heart twisted. Part of her hated his noble cruelty, yet part recognized the man she once loved. So you left? No, Thomas said softly. I stayed nearby. Ran cattle past your ridge every spring. Watched your light in the window. Watched you bury your husband. Watched you walk alone. Eleanor gasped. You were here. Thomas nodded. But when I finally found courage to speak, your son forbade me near. Said I'd done enough damage. Her eyes burned. My son did not know my heart. Thomas gave a faint, sad smile. Neither did I. Fire popped, sparks climbing and dying. Eleanor's voice barely rose above the crackling wood. Why come now? Thomas lifted a small folded paper from his coat, edges torn by cold and time. I found your son's grave, he whispered. Saw your name carved beside the prayer stone. I thought maybe you followed him. He swallowed. And when I learned you lived still, I could not die without asking if forgiveness had grown in you. Her breath caught, air sharp against ribs. You think forgiveness is easy at this age, Thomas? No, he said softly. I think it might be the only thing left worth tending. She stared at him, the boy she lost, remade as a man aged by road and regret. Outside, wind scraped the walls, winter urging her to choose. Eleanor rose, every bone aching, crossed to her desk. She lifted the old letter, the promise he'd never kept, and held it over the flame. Thomas stood, alarmed. Eleanor, she dropped it. Paper curled black, ink turned ash, and the past burned. When she turned back, her voice was steady. I do not forgive you for leaving. Thomas bowed his head. But, she said softly, I am too tired to hate you anymore. He looked up, raw, hope flickering. And what now? She gestured to the empty chair by the hearth. Now we talk, as though 40 years did not steal what it couldn't kill. Thomas's breath shook. He sat. She sat. For the first time in 40 winters, they faced one another. Not young hearts, but weathered souls. Tell me, Thomas, she whispered, what life cost you when you rode away? He opened his mouth, but a sudden knock shattered the fragile peace. 3 hard strikes. They turned, startled. Eleanor whispered, no one calls at this hour. Thomas rose, hand near his coat pocket, shadow flickering. Eleanor stepped toward the door. What if? Thomas caught her wrist. Let me. He opened it. Wind slammed in, snow spinning. A woman stood on the step, young, fierce-eyed, breath smoking in the cold. My name is Claire Hale, she said, and I'm looking for the man who broke my mother's life. Thomas froze. Eleanor's blood went cold. Claire's gaze locked on Thomas like a judge. You, she said, voice sharp. You're the one she spoke of. Thomas's face drained. Eleanor staggered. Your mother. Claire nodded, fury trembling in her mouth. She died with your name on her curse. Thomas whispered, Anna. Claire's jaw shook. My mother said you left her, too. Wind roared, and Eleanor's heart cracked in places she didn't know could break again. Thomas looked at Eleanor, devastation in his eyes. I didn't know, he whispered. Claire stepped forward. I came for answers. Or justice. Eleanor stared, world tilting. And Thomas, after 40 years of silence, was suddenly not the only past returning. The doorway held 3 people and 40 years of unspoken ruin. Snow gusted past Claire's skirts, a plain calico dress beneath a heavy wool coat, travel-worn, hem-iced. Her gloves were frayed, her eyes sharp, her voice too steady for her age. Thomas stood rigid, hat in his hand, as if a rifle had struck him instead of words. Eleanor's fingers tightened on the doorframe. She felt her age in her bones, yet her heart beat like a young widow's. "Come in," Eleanor whispered. Kindness was the only rope holding the moment from tearing. Claire hesitated, then stepped inside. She brushed snow from her shoulders, scanning the cabin, the hearth, the table, the worn rocking chair, as though inspecting the stage of her mother's grief. Thomas sank heavily into his seat by the fire, elbows on his knees, head bowed. He looked older in the lamplight, burdened, as though the past had caught him at last. Claire stood before him. "My mother told me you were the first man she ever loved," she said quietly, "and the one who abandoned her before dawn." Thomas's jaw clenched. "I did not abandon Anna," he murmured. Claire's voice cut like a blade. She waited. She prayed. She took someone else's name, but she never healed. Thomas closed his eyes. Eleanor watched his hands tremble. "Where is she now?" he asked. Claire swallowed, something flickering through her posture. "Buried," she said faintly. 3 winters passed. Eleanor drew in a breath, sharp and involuntary. Thomas stiffened, as if struck. "Anna," he whispered. Claire stared at him, fierce grief behind her anger. "She made me promise to find you," she said, "to tell you that the same silence you left Eleanor with, you left her with too." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You knew him?" Claire turned, bitter smile thin. "My mother spoke your name before she died. Eleanor. She said you were the woman he belonged to, long before she loved him." Eleanor's heart twisted. How would she know of me?" Claire's gaze dropped to the hearth. "He told her once, but never again." Eleanor looked sharply at Thomas. "What did you do?" Thomas lifted his head, grief pooling deep. "I lost my voice in war. By the time I recovered, I met Anna. I was lonely, wandering. She was kind, full of life." He swallowed hard. "I cared for her, I did. But I could not give her all of me, because a part of me still belonged here." Claire's hands balled at her sides. And she knew that. She died knowing that. Eleanor stood, shawl held tight. "Why did she send you here?" Claire looked at Thomas, hatred and hunger warring in her eyes. "To see if you ever told Eleanor the truth," she said. "If you ever spoke the name of the woman who raised me half loving a ghost." Thomas rose slowly, as though climbing from a grave. "Claire, I did not know she had a child." "No," Claire spat. "You didn't ask." Silence cracked like brittle wood. Eleanor moved toward Claire. "Sit, child," she murmured. "Travel wears more than the body." Claire hesitated, then sat, shoulders shaking once before she steadied herself. Thomas paced, a man unraveling. "Anna once wrote me," he said, "a single letter. It came years after I returned." And watched Eleanor marriage bowed. Claire lifted her chin. "Did you answer?" Thomas flinched. "No." The word rattled the cabin. Claire's eyes filled with hot tears, not the weeping kind, the burning kind. "My mother waited by the window every spring," she said. "She believed you would ride back and claim her." Eleanor turned away, grief flooding her as she realized Anna's story mirrored her own. Thomas stood behind Claire, but could not touch her. "I was broken," he whispered, too afraid to mend another life after failing one. Claire shook her head. "No, you were a coward twice." Thomas bowed. He did not disagree. Eleanor braced a hand against her table. "So why send you now?" she asked Claire gently. The young woman looked at the 2 older ones, then at the fire. "Because she feared," Claire said softly, voice cracking, "that you would forgive him too easily." Eleanor stiffened. Claire continued, "And because she feared if you didn't, you'd die without ever knowing there was someone else who loved him too." Eleanor sank into her rocking chair. "So she gave you to me," Eleanor murmured, "as witness, as warning, and perhaps as plea." Claire's gaze flickered. "I came to see which woman he truly left behind." Eleanor's lips parted, but Thomas spoke first, voice low, breaking both. Claire's glare softened, but did not vanish. "And now what? You ask for pity? Forgiveness." Thomas turned to Eleanor first. "Eleanor, I came to ask if there was still time to know you again." Then he turned to Claire. "And I came to face what I refused in youth." Claire stood abruptly. "Then face this." She pointed toward Eleanor. "She waited for you 40 winters. through death, motherhood, silence. She then turned to Thomas, voice hardening. And you watch her do it. Tears streaked Claire's cheeks. You do not get to rewrite that easily. Eleanor rose, slowly, painfully, hands on the back of her chair. No, she said. He does not. Thomas looked at her, breath held. But, Eleanor whispered, he does not get to die alone with regret, either. Claire's anger faltered. Eleanor stepped closer to Thomas. I do not know if I can love you again, she said softly. But I know what loneliness does to a soul, and I would not wish it on anyone. Thomas closed his eyes, relief and grief warring. Claire stared, unsure whether to hate the mercy or envy it. Then, a soft tapping broke the air. Not at the door, at the window. All three turned. Snowflakes pressed against the pane, but behind them, a shadow. Not wind, not storm, a silhouette, a man. Thomas grabbed his coat, the old revolver from within. Claire gasped. Are you expecting someone? No, Eleanor Guisperth. No one comes at this hour. Thomas strode to the door, lantern in one hand, pistol in the other. He opened it. Wind roared through. And a rider stood in the yard. Coat swept with snow, hat dripping melt, horse snorting steam. Thomas Reed, the stranger called. Thomas squared his shoulders. Who asks? The rider dismounted, boots crunching ice. I carry a message, he said, from someone you left behind. Thomas paled. Eleanor stepped forward, fear cold in her bones. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. As the rider approached the lamplight, Eleanor froze, because the man looked too much like Thomas for coincidence. And with a voice rough as winter, he said, You owe me a father's name. Claire whispered, Oh God. The stranger stared at Thomas. We share the same mother. Silence shattered. Eleanor grabbed the table to keep from falling. Thomas staggered as though shot. Claire cried out, and the past Thomas thought buried walked straight into Eleanor's cabin. The stranger brushed snow from his shoulders, revealing eyes the same storm gray as Thomas, but younger, steadier, sharpened by years of survival. Eleanor's voice barely formed. Come inside before you freeze. He hesitated. The hardness in him learned, not born, then stepped into the cabin. Claire shifted aside, stunned. Thomas remained near the hearth, pistol lowered but not forgotten. The stranger unbuttoned his coat with stiff fingers. Name's James, he said. James Hale. The surname struck Eleanor like falling timber. Claire looked sharply at him. Hale? My mother's name. James gave a humorless smirk. So it's true then. Thomas swallowed, throat working painfully. Your mother was Anna Hale. James' jaw twitched. She was Anna Hale until she married my stepfather, he corrected. Then her surname became Ward. But she kept Hale for me. Claire stared, bewildered. I thought I was her only child. James shrugged, voice cold. She had me 10 winters before you. Claire clutched the back of Eleanor's chair, dizzy. Eleanor stepped between them. Sit, all of you. James looked at her, evaluating, then sank into the nearest chair. Thomas stayed standing, unable to move. James unrolled a leather pouch from his coat, thin paper sealed in wax. She made me swear, before she died, to deliver this. Thomas reached for it, but James held it back. Not yet. His gaze cut to Claire. She said if you found the cabin, I'd maybe find you here too. Claire's face drained. Why would she think that? James shrugged, though something trembled beneath. Because she believed the past would chase itself home before she closed her eyes. Eleanor sat beside the fire, shawl tight around her. Tell me about your mother, she urged. James exhaled, jaw clenched. She spent her last years remembering a man she hated loving. His eyes snapped toward Thomas. You. Thomas flinched. James continued. She told me you belonged to another woman, and you never truly came back for her. Claire whispered, Did she speak of me? James nodded softly. Often. Claire stepped forward, voice trembling. How did we never meet? James looked away. Because when you were born, our mother was afraid she'd lose you too. So she sent me away to my uncle's ranch. Claire's hand covered her mouth. She feared Thomas taking me, she whispered. James' silence was confirmation. Eleanor's heart twisted. Thomas, she breathed, you broke 2 women. Thomas rubbed his forehead, as if memory itself burned. I loved Anna, he murmured, but never enough to place her second to Eleanor. James snorted. You didn't love her enough to stay, that's truth. Thomas's voice frayed. I was a coward. James leaned forward. No, you were selfish. Silence held, hard, suffocating. Thomas finally spoke, voice low. Give me the letter. James stared, long, unblinking. Do you want it because you care, he asked, or because guilt eats at you? Thomas did not answer fast, the pause itself an answer. James threw the letter onto the table. Then read your punishment. Thomas's hands shook as he broke the seal. Eleanor, Claire, and James watched, the fire casting shadowed light on his face. He read silently, eyes scanning, then suddenly stopped, breath vanishing as though the ink struck him across the chest. What? Eleanor whispered. Thomas sat heavily, paper falling from his grip. She forgave me, he whispered, and hated herself for it. Claire closed her eyes, tears slipping. James reached for the letter, reading aloud. You were the love that wrecked me, Thomas read, but you were love still. His voice wavered, but he continued. I do not want heaven if it means forgetting you. But I pray our children learn to live where we could not. James looked at Claire then, first time with softness. Children, he repeated. Eleanor absorbed the word and all implied. She meant for you to find each other, Eleanor said gently. James shoved the letter toward Claire. It doesn't change who left her. Claire's voice cracked. No, James, but it changes who we were to her. James' hardened posture faltered. Eleanor rose, each step slow, until she stood before him. You came for truth, child, not blood. James looked at her, pain flickering behind bravado. Truth. He gestured toward Thomas. Truth sits here breathing while she lies in the ground. Eleanor lifted his chin, not unkind. Then bury her with peace. She stepped aside. And find what life you have left. James looked at Claire again, that tentative thread of kinship winding between them. So you're my sister, he murmured. Claire nodded, tears falling freely now. And you're my brother. Eleanor's own tears blurred. Thomas sat, trembling, shoulders hunched, grief pouring through old bones. Then James did something unexpected. He walked to Thomas, hands and fists. I didn't come to kill you, he said. Thomas lifted haunted eyes. I wouldn't fight it if you had. James shook his head. I came so you could see the hurt you left, and maybe decide to live differently before Earth takes you too. Thomas closed his eyes. I am sorry. James swallowed. I know. The fire crackled, each flame a wound, each ember a choice. Claire and James stood awkwardly, siblings in a world where family failed them before they knew they had one. Eleanor stepped forward, holding Thomas's letter, then placed it into the flames alongside her own. Claire gasped. James stared. Thomas whispered, Eleanor, why burn it? She watched the paper curl. Because the past keeps us frozen, she said softly. And I don't intend to die in winter. Then she turned, voice steady, commanding as only age and loss can teach. You will all stay here tonight. There is supper enough, warmth enough, and pain enough to share. James looked unsure. Thomas whispered, Eleanor, but she held up a hand. No more apologies. Not tonight. Tonight we sit and eat and learn who we are in the present, not in the ghosts behind us. Thomas bowed his head, broken and grateful. Claire slowly sat, shoulders sinking. James nodded stiffly, accepting place if not peace. Eleanor set bread and broth on the table. As they sat, the storm thickened outside, but inside, something fragile formed. A family, not by intention, but by healing. Yet when Eleanor glanced at the window, she saw movement again. A lone rider, circling wide, watching. Not storm, not wind, a figure. Thomas noticed her gaze, turned, froze. That's mine, he whispered. That's the man I rode with years ago. James stiffened. He followed you here. Thomas's face drained. No, he tracked me here. Eleanor's voice trembled. Who is he? Thomas's eyes never left the window. The one who told me Eleanor married. The one who stole letters and a scent. the one who profited from every silence. James rose, fists clenched. Why is he here? Thomas's voice sank with dread. To finish what he began. The rider dismounted. Claire stepped back, fear rising. A knock struck the door. 3 times, just as Thomas had done earlier. Only this time, it was not the past seeking forgiveness. It was danger, and the truth deeper than any of them imagined was about to walk in. The knock echoed through Eleanor's cabin like the toll of a bell, deliberate, heavy, practiced. Thomas moved toward the door, revolver hidden under his coat. Claire backed away, gripping the chair. James stepped to Eleanor's side, protective without thinking. Eleanor's hand brushed his forearm. Steady, she whispered. He nodded once. Thomas drew breath, bracing himself, then opened the door. A tall man with a hawk-like face stood there, snow-crusted in his beard. His coat was clean despite the storm. His boots were polished, his hat expensive, a man built on profit, not hardship. His eyes slid past Thomas and swept the cabin, as if inventorying damage he had caused years ago. Well, he drawled. Reed, I thought you'd be dead by now. Thomas didn't step aside. That would have made your life easier. The man smirked. Life is never easy. But business must be tidy. James stepped forward. Who is this? The stranger tipped his hat, patronizing. Silas Ward. Rancher. Trader. Messenger. James clenched. My stepfather. Claire froze. You, she whispered, voice shrinking. You raised me. Silas barely acknowledged her. Thomas sneered. Raised her or used her? Silas ignored him, stepping into the cabin without invitation. Eyes settling on Eleanor, the hearth, the table laid for supper. Well now, he said, isn't this charming? James snapped. State your reason and leave. Silas removed his gloves, warming fingers at Eleanor's fire, as though he owned the place. I came to collect something, he said, or rather, someone. His eyes flicked to Thomas. You owe me more than apologies, Reed. Thomas stiffened. I owe you nothing. You owe me profits lost, Silas answered, tone still casual. Every letter I intercepted, every message Anna sent you, I held because you wouldn't pay. Claire gasped, hand to mouth. You kept her letters? Silas shrugged. A woman's heart is leverage, nothing more. James lunged, but Eleanor stepped between, calm yet iron. Sir, she said softly, you are in my home. Speak of women as tools again, and you will learn fear in a way you never sold. Silas actually paused, surprised, as if no one had ever talked back to him. His voice cooled. Fine, I'll speak plainly. Reed gave me something long ago I never collected. Thomas shook his head. I gave you nothing. Silas leaned against the wall. Your silence, he said, and silence is costly. He stepped closer, eyes glittering cold. You ran from responsibility. I fed the lies. I fed the distance. And I profited from both women's suffering. You owe me. Thomas's jaw trembled, rage rising. I owe you nothing, Silas cut him off. You owe me truth. Tonight, you tell it. To both women you ruined, and to your children you never claimed. The cabin air froze. Eleanor whispered, Why now? Silas smiled thinly. Because Anna Hale died forgiving him, and I cannot abide that. James stared, horrified. You're here because forgiveness offended you? Silas shrugged. Forgiveness ruins business. A dead woman who pardons her heartbreak? No profit in that. Claire whispered, You monster. Silas turned to her, expression shifting, harsh but strangely curious. You resemble her, he said. Too much, perhaps. That is why I could never stomach you. James surged toward him. Thomas grabbed his arm. No, Thomas whispered. Truth first. He turned to Silas. You said I owed you truth. Here it is. He stepped toward Eleanor, voice trembling but clear. I loved her. Before anything else. Before war. Before letters. Before Anna. I loved Eleanor. Eleanor blinked, breathing uneven. Thomas faced Claire. I cared for your mother, deeply, but I never healed enough to give her whole love. He turned to James, voice cracking. And I did not know of you. Had I known, I would have fought the world to claim you. James' eyes burned. Then fight now, he snapped. Fight him. Fight the silence. Thomas stepped closer, facing Silas. You stole years from Anna. You lived off pain you fed. Silas' smirk faltered. Thomas's voice deepened. But tonight, you starve. Eleanor stepped beside Thomas. You think you dictate endings, she said softly. But you control nothing here. Claire rose, shoulders squared. You hurt my mother. You tried to shape her story for profit. But she left something greater than hurt. James joined her. She left us. The three stood, a line Silas could not break. Silas scoffed, reaching into his coat. Eleanor stiffened. Thomas raised his revolver. But Silas withdrew not a gun, but a bundle of sealed letters, cracked wax, fading ink. Eleanor gasped. Anna's letters. Claire rushed forward, tears spilling. You kept them all, sold them all, Silas corrected. But this stack, he looked at Thomas. These I couldn't sell. They were too pathetic. He tossed them at Thomas's feet. Read them. Let guilt finish you. Thomas knelt, hands shaking, lifting the letters as if lifting bones. Claire stepped to James, voice trembling. He is not father, but he is blood. James nodded, jaw set. Silas watched them, then turned for the door. I leave you with truth, he said. See if you choke on it. Thomas suddenly spoke, quiet, dangerous. Silas, in her ears as the girl drew nearer, boots sinking into drifts, cloak hem crusted white. James and Claire turned toward the window, their faces a mirror of disbelief. Thomas stood without meaning to, knees weak, hand gripping the table edge. She looks, Claire whispered. Like Anna, James finished. But Eleanor saw something else, something in the girl's eyes, even from a distance, a steadiness she recognized. She saw her own youth reflected there. Thomas moved toward the door, forgetting his coat, forgetting breath. Eleanor caught his sleeve. Wait. He turned, lost. What if, Eleanor said gently. You do not break her before she steps inside. He swallowed, nodding. Eleanor opened the door. The wind rushed in, snow swirling around the girl as she approached. She couldn't have been more than 16 or 17. Dark hair braided beneath her hood, cheeks raw from cold, eyes watchful but not frightened. When she reached the threshold, she lifted the folded paper. This belongs to someone here, she said. Thomas steadied himself. Who are you? She met his gaze, calm, unshaken by the storm or the strangers. My name is Lily, she answered. Lily Hale. Claire gasped, hand to mouth. James stiffened, jaw clenching. Eleanor felt the cabin lean. Come inside, she murmured, before frost takes you. Lily entered, glancing at the faces, assessing them one by one with surprising composure. James asked sharply, Where did you come from? A homestead 3 days west, Lily said, near the river bend. Her eyes flicked to Thomas. My mother left this behind. Thomas staggered. Anna. Lily nodded. She told me if anything ever happened to her, I was to deliver this. Claire stared. She knew you existed? Lily frowned faintly. Anna raised me until I was 8. Then Silas took me away. Said she couldn't keep both her shame and her children. James surged, fury rising. Eleanor stopped him with a hand. Sit, Eleanor said to Lily softly. The girl did, shoulders straight, posture polite, yet guarded. Thomas stared at her, as if seeing a ghost wearing youth's face. May I have the letter? Lily hesitated, then held it out. Thomas reached, but Lily pulled back slightly. My mother said you weren't to read it alone. Eleanor's heart clenched. She feared truth lost in silence. Lily nodded. She said if you opened it alone, you'd hide it or run. Thomas looked away, because the accusation was not wrong. Read aloud, Lily said, so I may see the man she wrote to. Thomas sat, the firelight flickering across his hollow cheeks, and broke the seal. His voice shook. To the last man I ever waited for. Eleanor closed her eyes. Lily leaned forward, breath steady. Thomas continued, If this reaches you, know that I try to hate you. I failed. Claire's tears fell. James flinched. You belong to another, yet I could not stop belonging to you. Thomas's hand trembled, ink blurring. You gave me children you never knew. He choked, but forced himself onward. Do not run from them as you ran from us. Lily's gaze did not soften, only deepened. Let Eleanor teach you what I could not. Eleanor gasped, the letter slicing into her heart. Thomas looked up, devastated. She wanted, he whispered, for you to mend me. Eleanor steadied her breath. She wanted someone to. Thomas bowed his head, broken. Lily rose. I did not come for father, she said. I came for truth. Claire moved closer, cautious, sorrowful. How long have you traveled alone? Since Silas died, Lily said flatly. James blinked. He's dead. Couple months passed, Lily replied. Pa died owing more enemies than I could count. Thomas whispered, Pa. My stepfather, Lily corrected sharply. Thomas nodded, relief piercing sorrow. Lily looked at all three older faces. If Anna loved you, she said to Thomas, it cost her everything. Thomas swallowed. I know. No, Lily said softly. You don't. She stepped closer, firelight touching her like dawn. You want forgiveness because you're weary, but you haven't earned it. The words struck Thomas rigid. Eleanor spoke gently. Child, forgiveness is not earned. It is given. Lily's gaze flicked to Eleanor, measuring her differently now. My mother said that too, Lily murmured. But she never believed it. Eleanor nodded, tears rising. I did not believe it either, not truly, until tonight. Lily studied her. You did not let bitterness rot you. No, Eleanor said softly. But it tried. Lily turned to James and Claire. You are my brother. You're my sister. But blood is not enough. James stepped closer, his voice breaking. Then let us learn, Lily. She looked at Claire, whose tears were honest. Start with sitting, Eleanor urged gently. Lily slowly lowered herself to the floor by the hearth. It was then Eleanor noticed. The girl carried no pack, no food, only her mother's letter. You've eaten nothing, Eleanor murmured. I am used to less, Lily replied. Eleanor pulled her own shawl around Lily's shoulders. Warmth offered without condition. Lily stiffened, then slowly softened into it. Thomas looked at his daughters, at his son, and his face crumpled. I failed all of you, he whispered. Lily met his eyes, cold but wounded. Yes. He nodded, no defense. But he whispered, if God grants me breath beyond this winter, let me spend it mending what I shattered. Silence, but not empty. James lowered himself beside Lily, awkward but trying. Claire knelt too, cautious, grieving, hopeful. Eleanor sat, watching, as a broken man faced what decades had stolen. You will not mend alone, she said softly. Thomas lifted his eyes to her. Shame and gratitude mingled. You would stand with me? I have stood alone long enough, Eleanor replied. Let us all learn together. A long quiet settled. Then Lily spoke, voice fragile. If Anna could see this, she might sleep better in her grave. James murmured, then let us give her peace. Thomas reached a shaking hand, but did not touch, only offered it. Slowly, Claire placed her hand atop his. James hesitated, then set his beside hers. Lily waited, staring, then finally laid hers on top. Eleanor covered them with her own. The cabin breathed. Healing, imperfect but begun. Later, as the hour thinned, Eleanor walked outside to gather wood. The snow had calmed. Stars glimmered faint. But tracks, fresh boot prints, cut behind the house. Not Silas. Not Lily. Someone else had been watching. Eleanor lifted the lantern, light catching something half buried under snow. Metal. She scraped the drift with her boot, a rifle cartridge. Fresh fired. Her breath misted, thin and cold. Someone had aimed at the cabin and decided not to shoot. She knelt, another footprint, heavier, pointing toward the ridge. Someone waiting. Someone not finished. Inside, for fragile souls began stitching themselves together. Unaware, a shadow lingered. Eleanor straightened, fear cold and sharp. She whispered to the night, do not take this from us. But the ridge did not answer. Only the sound of a horse, distant, waiting. Eleanor returned inside, and what she carried was not wood, but warning. The past had not given everything back. Something darker still walked toward them. And forgiveness, the rarest frontier, might soon be tested by fire. Eleanor shut the door softly behind her, carrying more fear than firewood. Inside, the four sat before the hearth, awkwardly bound by blood and pain, but warming toward one another like coals stirred from ash. Thomas looked up immediately, reading the worry in her eyes. "What is it?" Eleanor hung her cloak. "Voice careful. We are not alone." Lily straightened, the instinctive stillness of girls raised in hard places. James rose, hand slipping toward the knife at his belt. Claire gripped the hearth chair. "What do you mean?" Eleanor nodded toward the window. "Someone has been watching the house." Thomas moved first. An old soldier awakened. He opened a cabinet under the stairs, brought out an oil lamp and 2 rifles. He pressed one into James' hands. "You know how to use this?" James nodded, the answer unquestionable. Lily stood, but Thomas motioned gently. "No, stay inside. Both of you." She bristled. "I can shoot." Thomas paused, then nodded softly. "I know, but tonight I need you alive more than armed." Eleanor touched Thomas's arm. "Do not go hunting ghosts." Thomas gave her a tired smile. "Ghosts are seldom the ones who come back. Men are." He and James stepped out into the cold, rifles ready, lanterns sweeping the yard. The cabin door shut, leaving Eleanor, Claire, and Lily inside. The fire burned low. Eleanor added wood, her hands steadying. Claire whispered to Lily, "Are you afraid?" Lily's jaw set. "No, fear is familiar." Eleanor sat beside her. "You do not have to be familiar with it here." They waited, minutes stretching long. Outside, muffled voices carried through snow, then heavy boots returned. Thomas entered first, James behind him. "No rider," Thomas said, "but tracks head toward the ridge." James added quietly, "Someone watched us and left when the lamp was lit." Eleanor's fears tightened. Thomas shut the door, leaning on it. "That man was not hunting, only watching." Claire asked, "Watching what?" Thomas looked at Lily, pain crossing his features. "Whether I would own my children." Silence fell, heavy as snowdrift. Eleanor's voice steadied. "Well, then he saw." Thomas nodded, "Perhaps," but his eyes did not ease. Later, when cabin had settled, Eleanor found Lily sitting alone by the window, staring out into the night. "Your thoughts run fast," Eleanor said gently, taking the chair beside her. Lily shrugged. "Too young for such heavy resignation." "I don't know what to do with a father," she whispered. Eleanor smiled sadly. "Neither did I, until tonight." Lily's brow furrowed. "What do you want from him?" Eleanor looked toward the hearth, where Thomas slept lightly in the chair, his hand unconsciously extended toward James, as if reaching for a son even in sleep. "I don't want anything," she said softly, "but I will not waste the years I have left waiting for what was lost." Lily studied her. "Anna said you were strong." Eleanor turned, hurt and tenderness warring. "She envied me more than she should have," Eleanor murmured. "And I envied her, too." Lily blinked. "Why?" Eleanor's voice softened to almost a whisper. "Because someone loved her enough to break." Lily swallowed, tears she hadn't intended filling her eyes. Anna said, "Love ruins women." Eleanor shook her head. "No, love ruins pride. It ruins illusions. But love itself? It saves what nothing else can." Lily looked again toward Thomas. His face softened in flickering firelight. "He doesn't look like a man who ruined everything." "No," Eleanor said. "He looks like one ruined by what he regrets." Dawn crept into the world, pale, cautious light spilling through the cabin windows. Thomas woke first, the world heavy but gentler. James rose next, then Claire. Eleanor brewed coffee and winter broth, the scent spreading warm. They ate quietly, a fragile family learning how silence can heal when shared rather than forced. After breakfast, Thomas stood, his voice steady but low. "I will not stay if you do not want me here." James and Claire exchanged glances, but neither spoke first. Lily rose, looking straight into Thomas's face. "You cannot mend years and days," she said, "but you can stay long enough to learn who we are." Thomas's eyes glistened. "Then I stay." Eleanor touched his sleeve and nodded. Claire exhaled shakily. James cleared his throat. Lily looked to Eleanor. "We are not done talking," she whispered. "No," Eleanor said. "But today we stop running from beginning." The weeks that followed were quiet and filled with small mending. James fixed the shutters. Thomas taught Lily how to cut wood without wasting strength. Claire helped Eleanor mend quilts and plant wintergreens in cold frames. They did not speak constantly. They learned one another in silence. One evening, Eleanor sat by the fire, Thomas across from her, Lily and Claire sewing, James playing an old fiddle quietly near the hearth. Thomas gazed at Eleanor, eyes filled with something unspoken. "Eleanor," he murmured. She looked up, needle paused. "I need to say something." She waited. "I do not ask you to love me again," he said softly. "I only ask you not to send me away alone when your time comes." Eleanor looked at him. Weathered man, broken past, fragile hope. She folded her sewing, laid it aside. "Thomas," she whispered, "you need not die alone, but you must learn to live with those you have now." She reached across the space, touched his hand. "I do not promise love. I promise presence." He closed his eyes and wept quietly, relief breaking him. Spring thawed the ridge, grass pushing through snow, streams waking. One morning, Eleanor walked outside alone. A rider moved along the ridge. The watcher returned. She lifted her hand, not in fear, but recognition. He paused, then turned his horse away, vanishing in the thawing trees. She understood then. He was merely shadow from their story, now powerless. Inside the cabin sat 4 lives mending. She whispered to the open air, "Love does not return unchanged, but it returns." That evening, Thomas read aloud from Anna's remaining letters, not to punish himself now, but to honor her. The last line struck them all. The greatest mercy is not forgetting, but forgiving what cannot be undone. Eleanor looked at Lily, James, Claire, Thomas. "That," she said softly, "is the land we build on." Outside, wind eased, stars blinked over the ridge. The cabin light glowed like a beacon. Inside, a family, unlikely and imperfect, found belonging where the world had once left ruin. Eleanor rocked in her chair, gray hair glowing in firelight. 40 winters," she murmured, "and spring still finds me." Thomas smiled, gentle weathered. "And you." The past did not vanish, but it finally sat down, no longer hurting, only remembered. And love, after 40 years of silence, found its voice again, not in youth, but in mercy. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Tales from the Old West, where every tale brings warmth, wisdom, and the beauty of a life well lived.